Good morning. Well, that's not much of a good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always nice to have that energy come back a little bit. Well, this morning I'm going to introduce to you the law of compensation in a slightly different way. Now, that's a big fancy word. And that fancy word basically means cause and effect. But it has a little bit more to it than just cause and effect because it also kind of brings in balance. The idea that there is a balance to the cause and effect. That it isn't just that you have this cause and here you have an effect and you don't know really if it's balanced out or not. Compensation kind of includes that balance. A lot of times when we think of compensation, we think of recompense, which is is the idea that you work and you receive money back for the work that you put out. And that's very true. Whatever you put out, you're going to receive back. And it's going to come back full measure, one way or another, one way or another. And but where I want to go is to the Bible. And now, when I started in religious science, I was thinking, oh, thank goodness they don't quote from the Bible every 2 minutes, and they don't, because it seemed like other churches, all they did was quote from the Bible and then tell you their idea of what the Bible said. And sometimes not even that much. They would just really quote and tell you what they thought the lesson was. Well, I have gained a new understanding of the Bible, and I've really become passionate about it because the Bible can be read in very many different ways. Most of us have a tendency to read it very literally. This, like a historical novel. This is what has happened. There was Adam and Eve, and then there was this, and then there was that, and finally we get to Jesus and on. But I don't think the Bible was written historically. Because to me, if it was written historically, it doesn't make much sense. Who in the world did Adam and Eve's children marry if they were the first people? Who can, and because it says, and the sons went and married. Who did they marry? She didn't have daughters. So anyway, there's several things like that in the Bible that just really did not make sense to me historically. So I realized that there was another way of looking at the Bible. And one of the ways of looking at the Bible is metaphysically and metaphorically. The idea that the Bible are stories to give an example, stories like what we tell when we are up giving a service, so that you can kind of understand better what is going on. It's an example, it's a metaphor, it's a myth, sort of thing, and the Bible has put these in different orders. Now we know, most of us here have figured out that the Bible has been translated more than once and probably has lost some in the translations here and there, and it's also been very selective by certain people about what was going to be in it and what wasn't going to be in it, and much of it was written to control the population at the time. But, even at that, the truth comes through. The truth comes through. It can't be hidden. And so one of the books I'm going to talk about is one that's not very popular, and that's Leviticus. If any of you know the Bible, Leviticus is the third book of the Bible. And what it talks about is the rules and regulations, what you can do and what you can't do, what plates you can eat off of, what plates you can't, what foods you can eat, what foods you can't. Mostly the can'ts, not so much the coulds. And you'll notice that that's how the Ten Commandments is also written. It's, thou shalt not this, shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not dishonor thy parents. It's a lot of shout nots. Now, the way I want to present this is if you think of a 2-year-old, which is learning a lot about life between 2 and 4. They're learning a lot of those rules and regulations. Think how often you tell that child, don't touch this, don't go in the street, don't spit your food, don't, or no, no, no. That's how we talk to them, right? And oftentimes we don't, how often do you say, oh yeah, honey, do touch this or do that? It's mostly the don'ts. Well, I think that's a lot of how Leviticus and the Ten Commandments was written, in those don'ts. Because the mentality of people at that time was more on that 2-year-old level. Not to put them down, it's just the way things were. They didn't have the advantages of the education, they didn't have the advantages of the communication that we have now and the widespread ideas. And so a lot of it was don't do these. So the Leviticus was written for health reasons, to help people not eat those things that made them sick. It was written for cleanliness. If you look in there, there's things that they're supposed to do and not do as far as their body's concerned. And it's also some of the ideas of following those 10 commandments a little further on than what the commandments simply said. Now, another way of looking at that is as you mature physically, those rules that you learned at 2 and 4 years old suddenly are not really rules as much as they're guidelines. They become guidelines. You don't have to be told, don't touch the stove, it's hot. You kind of know that when you see a stove and you're careful about touching it because you know it might be hot. So it becomes a guideline as you get older instead of a hard set rule. Now, if you go a little bit further into a spiritual idea, spiritual maturity, those rules don't even become an idea of a rule anymore. They aren't even common sense, really. What they are is kind of a, oh yeah, naturally, I would be careful because I understand. It's an understanding. It becomes deeper than just having to pay attention to rules. It becomes a way of living, a lifestyle. So in Leviticus, it mentions, I wrote it down so I got it right. Leviticus 24:17 through 20 says, and he that killeth any man shall surely be put to death. And he that killeth a beast, make it good, beast for beast. And if a man causes a blemish in his neighbor, as he has done, so it shall be done unto him. Breach for a breach, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. As he has caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done unto him again. Well, that's really giving us that example of compensation. What you put out is what you receive back. So in this case, at first it's saying, you know, if you knock somebody's tooth out, you're going to get your tooth knocked out. Now think of that 2-year-old again. What happens when they hit somebody? They get hit back. That's immediately what happens. So you start teaching that 2-year-old that, you know, if you don't want to get hit, if you don't want to lose that tooth, then don't hit. Don't do that. As we get a little older and we mature and we look at that statement, we go, well, okay, that shows us the cause and effect. It shows us that we have to be careful, and we understand that logically. We can agree with that. Rules have to be made so people can live together, and it becomes kind of a guideline as to how you want to live. But now move it into the spiritual aspect. It's example of that compensation. It's the idea that what you put out into the universe is what you receive back. Now, I would tell you, religious science is really simple. We don't have a lot of rules. We don't have a lot of regulations. We don't tell you a lot of do's and don'ts or anything. What we tell you is there's a law of cause and effect, or of compensation. What you put out is what you get back. And it's real simple. Stop putting out what you don't want. And you won't get back what you don't want. You start putting out what you do want, and you get back what you do want. Real simple. But how come it's so hard? How come we make it so difficult for ourselves? Well, part of it is because of our habits. We get into those habits, the ways of acting. We get into, that 2-year-old gets into thinking that when they hit, they can be the bully of the area. And they find out that sometimes they can hit harder than somebody else. And so they become the leaders and the rulers. And that becomes a habit in their mind, thinking they can get away with something. But do we get away with anything? Not really. Not really. You've heard often the idea of those that live by the sword die by the sword. Well, I'll tell you, it goes further than that. You know, how we treated our bodies when we were young, guess what? Most of us are having the repercussions now. You know, most of us, when we were young, we thought we could eat the candy, we thought we could do the drugs maybe, we thought we could do the coffee and the cigarettes and all those things that we were told don't do because it's not really good for you, overeat and all that. And then we get older and we go, why is my body falling apart? What's happening to me? You know, and what we forget is we've stored all that in our body. We told our body constantly that that was how we wanted it to do. We wanted it to go a certain way. And so then our body starts complying to us, and then we get upset. And we don't know why. It's simple cause and effect. So if we don't want our body to continue to go on the path that it's going on, change the habits that you're doing with your body now. Simple, simple. The same thing goes for a relationship. When you have a relationship and you haven't, and so often we get in a relationship and then we ignore it, or we criticize it, or we act as though the other person is below us somehow or needs guidance. And then 10 years down the road, they ask for a divorce, and we're going, I had no clue. I didn't know this would happen. Simple cause and effect. What you give your attention to is what's going to happen. And if you are doing those things that sway you from where you want to be, that's what's going to happen. So you have to start acting. If you want your life to change today, if you're unsatisfied with an area of your life where you are sitting right now, whether it's financial, physical, emotional, or mental, stop doing what you're doing and figure out something else. You know, you can say, well, this is my belief system, this is where I come. You can use every excuse under the sun. You can say, this is my past, this is how I've been raised, this is the circumstances I'm in, I can't help myself for the way I am. You can. You can. You can change your life right now, starting this very moment if you choose to. Now, I'm not saying it won't take work. I'm not saying that you won't have to constantly remind yourself that you don't want to be going along this path you've been. I'm not saying that you won't have to maybe look at your past and go, well, what is my belief here? But you know, God is marvelous. God is really special because God gave us a way to do that. It's very simple. You look out around you, and if you don't like what you see, that's what you change. How hard is that, to see that? If you do like what you see around you, then do more of it and enjoy it more. Very simple, and yet we forget that simple thing. We forget that life is a reflection all around us. If somebody is criticizing us and telling us how bad they think we are, or telling us how stupid we think we are, that is ourselves trying to tell us something. That is a reflection. That isn't victimization, unless you're victimizing yourself. That is the universe. That is God saying, this is where you want to change. This is what you want to work on. So work on it. Work on it. quit whining about it, and go to work. Simple, simple, simple. And yet it's some of the most difficult stuff you'll ever do, and the most rewarding. And the most rewarding. Why is it the most rewarding? Because once you start seeing that the world around you is constantly reflecting to you who you are, then you can change it. Then you can make your life better. Then you can take control and never be a victim again. Not a victim of germs, not a victim of other people, not a victim of the job, not a victim of your family. You become the person you want to be. And you don't victimize anybody else, which is really neat. Because we don't want to gain control just so that we victimize somebody else. We want to help them see where they can change and grow. But guess what? It has to start right here. It has to start with each one of us doing our thing, being our way of going. And so back to Leviticus and his wonderful, wonderful idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and a blemish for a blemish. Where do you want to go with this? Personally, where do you want to go with this? Do you want to continue to go down that road of an eye for an eye? I would much rather go down the road and say a love for a love, a joy for a joy, a hand for a hand. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? That's giving that graciously of yourself. That's what the whole idea of Seva is about, that we talk about here in the church. It isn't to gain popularity and seeing, oh, see how good I am, how wonderful I am. I brought food and I help serve and I do this job and I do that job. What it is simply to reflect that goodness within you and allow that reflection to come back. Allow that reflection to come back. Be at peace with yourself. Be at peace. And that peace resides right here and right now. So the next time you read the Bible, if you choose to, the next time you read the Bible, which can be a lot of fun when you start really digging into it in a different way, understand that the Bible is a bunch of stories to help you see how your mind works. It's a bunch of stories to see how that works. Leviticus is an example of that stage where we have to follow all those laws, all those regulations, until we learn. Kind of like driving. When you have somebody with you saying, okay, fix the mirror, start the car, look over your shoulder, slowly pull out, not too much gas. It's all those little regulations that we have to get down in us and learn. And then they become automatic. They become on a different level, and you move on. And sometimes you understand that some of those rules and regulations can be dropped. Can be dropped. How many of you cross the street? Anybody cross the street here? You don't need to have somebody hold your hand anymore? Good. You were able to drop that. So some of the rules you can drop. And we look at Leviticus and we go, some of those rules we can drop and we can let go of because we are past that stage. And then some of the things we might want to stay with for a little while and allow to absorb. And then we move to a point, as I said, where we don't really need the rules and regulations anymore because it's just our state of being. Just our state of being. We know what we know and who we are. And that is the way that you will find changing your life with cause and effect happens. There'll be those times that you fall in the hole, go back into the habit, go back to that place where you have to remind yourself of all those rules. Oh yeah, I got to pay attention to my mind. I got to pay attention to what my thinking is. I got to look out here and see what's going on and see how it's reflecting me. And then after a while, you'll notice that it becomes automatic. And then it'll move into just a simple beingness. You'll be who you want to be because you won't need the rules and regulations and the constant reminders anymore. You'll be on target. You'll be that expression. And so I'd like everybody to join me in a treatment to know the truth of this and to recognize that this happens for each and every one of us every day. Now, the next service, we're going to talk a little bit more about Emerson instead, because Emerson had a wonderful, wonderful book section on the law of compensation. So please join with me. Oh, there is only spirit, and that spirit is all-encompassing. It is above me, below me, around me, to in front of me, behind me, surrounding me. There is not an atom of my body, there is not a thought of my mind, there is not an expression or a form that I look at where the spirit is not. And so I recognize from this that I am an essential part of spirit, that I am not separate from spirit, body, mind, or soul, that I do not in any way have to separate myself. And the only thing that might separate me is my own mind, my own thinking. And so I know this truth is true for me, and I know it's true for every person in this room and beyond, that each one of us is spirit and expression. Each one of us has all the attributes of spirit flowing through us, as us, allowing us to be whole and complete. And that the divine wisdom of the universe, of the ages, can flow through each and every one of us if we choose to. And so this moment, as I look at the idea of cause and effect, as I look at the idea of compensation, of getting that recompense or getting that payment in full back for what I put out, I recognize that it all comes down to what do I put out. It all comes down to what do I choose as my goal, and then how do I go about moving in that direction. And so I ask for the wisdom of the universe to flow through me, to allow me to take moments out of my day and see what is happening around me, to see what is reflecting back to me, what is allowing me to be different, and how can I be different? To see how I can take habits that I've been stayed in, that I have done over and over again, how can I take those and change them? And where, how, when? But I know Spirit will answer each of those questions because that clarity is in my mind right now. And so if there's any place where I'm challenged, I use that as an aid to reflect my understanding. I use that as an aid to tell me where I want to change. I use that instead of feeling victimized, I use it as a place of clarity and understanding and strength. And so as I let go of this treatment, I let go in the full understanding and in the joy and thankfulness that Spirit is always right here within me, guiding me. That I don't need to go anyplace else but within at the very moment that I need it and ask. Show me, guide me, be here with me, love me. And that is exactly what Spirit would do and is doing right now. So as I release this treatment, I release it with the joy of clarity, and understanding. I release it, and as I walk out with a new sense of clarity, that I am the way, the truth, and the light. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you. I think of compensation, which is an awfully long word. What I think of is the statue of Justice standing there holding up her scale with a blindfold, and that the idea of the scale needs to be balanced, needs to have that balance between whatever is put on one side and put on the other, which is partly what compensation is about. But the simple terms, if you want to remember what it is as far as we're concerned, it's cause and effect. Real simple. So what we're talking about with this idea is that if you put out a cause, if you put out a reason for something, if you put out an idea, then you're going to get back something in your life. Now, is the idea, what you get back in your life, going to look exactly like what you put out? Probably not. But it's still going to come back, and if you look at it, you can see where it came from. For instance, when I was a little girl, my dad used to yell and scream a lot. Now, that's neither good nor bad, really, but I can remember sometimes even putting my hands over my ears and saying, oh, I don't want to hear my parents fighting. I don't want to hear this yelling and screaming. Well, guess what? Years later, about 5 years ago, I had to start wearing hearing aids because unconsciously it came back. It was such a deep-seated idea in me that I so much didn't want to hear what was going on that I actually caused the situation in my life so I didn't have to hear what was going on anymore, and now I want to. Now I want to. But that's how it sometimes works. Cause and effect isn't always immediate. What you put in when you put something out, it doesn't always come back immediately. And I think a lot of you can see that in your own lives. Oftentimes when we were young, we've abused our body in some way. Maybe we've smoked, maybe we did hard work that was really too strenuous for us. Maybe we ate too much or ate too little or ate too much sugar, whatever it was, smoke, drink, whatever it was. And we abused our bodies because we thought, these bodies are marvelous, they'll last forever. Remember thinking that when you were young, or not thinking at all, which is mostly the case. But the thing is what happens is we get in our 30s and we get in our 40s and our 50s, and then we start having the repercussions of what we did, that smoking and the drinking and whatever else. And our bodies come back and we look at them and we're 50 years old and we go, why is my body breaking down? What did I do to deserve this? I'm a victim. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're not. You have never been a victim anywhere in your life, and I know some people will disagree with me about that idea. You know, when I was a baby, this happened to me. How in the world wasn't I a victim? Well, you still weren't a victim. It is not the thing that we want to look at, but we have to take responsibility that we have had a part in every cause. A part in every cause. Now, does that mean that we had the whole cause? Does it mean that whatever happened to us that was maybe violent or unpleasant had to happen because we created it somehow? No. No. But it does mean that on some level we might have been open to it. Or on some level we might have participated in it somehow. Another time when I was little, I used to get very upset that my dad wouldn't teach me golfing. And this is very mild, I know, but he wouldn't teach me golfing, and he had no handicap. He was that good of a golfer. And he would play with Arnold Palmer and a lot of the other great names at that time. but he wouldn't play professionally because he didn't want to spend the money for the entrance fees. But anyway, he was a wonderful golfer, and I always wanted him to teach me to golf. And I always thought, well, you know, he didn't teach me to golf. He should have taught me to golf. He should have known I wanted to golf. I was a victim of this. And then I started thinking about it. You know, I never asked him to teach me. You know, oftentimes, how often have we been in a situation that's even been abusive, and we've never said no? We haven't taken that time and said, no, I won't put up with this. No, I walk away. No, this isn't right. We just put up with it because we thought somehow we thought we should, or we had an image of ourselves as not being deserving of those things that were good. And so what happens? That creates this cause, or another cause on top of the first one, another cause that goes out and creates something in our life that comes back. So we start seeing in all sorts of areas in our lives where we aren't good enough. Somebody doesn't pay attention to us. Somebody else steals something from us. Somebody else says something derogatory. Somebody else gossips. And we start getting all that back, and we start thinking, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why am I being victimized like this? It's because we've put out the cause. Now, do we have to stay with that cause? No. No, the world is wonderful. God is wonderful in that he's given us this magnificent amount of love that's available for us right here and right now. And it isn't even hidden. It's just right here within our hearts. And once we start bringing that out, once we start making that the cause of our lives, guess what happens to us? That love starts expanding, and we start getting back the love reflecting to us. We start getting what we want instead of what we don't want. And believe me, what we don't want will come back to us full measure, but what we want will also come back full measure. When we give, when we create those causes of joy, when we create those causes of peace, when we create those causes of communication between people, those little places of absolute love, it comes flooding back. It opens the floodgates, and you'd be surprised what you get back. Do you get back the exact same thing from the exact same person? Not always. Sometimes you can try to open up to one person and love them as much as you can, and they won't necessarily be the one that reflects that back to you because of their own causes that they have in place, because of their own inhibitions and that. But will you get it from somebody else? I can guarantee it. I can absolutely guarantee it. And I can guarantee that when you start looking at the causes in your life, that your life will change forever. Absolutely change. Now, a wonderful little book that most of us have to study at one time or another if we're doing religious science is called Emerson's Essays. Now, if any of you know Ralph Waldo Emerson, he writes very poetically. And some of his sentences are 2 or 3 pages long. I am not kidding. They just go on and on and on, and comma after comma after comma. But he always has some wonderful, wonderful insights. And I'm going to read you one of them. I brought my notes. This is on page 80 of Emerson's Essays. A man cannot speak, but he judges himself. A man cannot speak, but he judges himself. With his will or against his will, he draws his portrait to the eye of his companions by every word. Every opinion reacts on him who utters it. So what's he saying there exactly? He's telling us that we're constantly putting out those causes and everybody else can see them, even if you think you've hidden them. Everybody else sees them. And on top of it, if you become skilled, you can see it too. Oftentimes, we aren't, things seem to be falling apart all around us, and we aren't quite sure, how do we fix it? How do we change it? Well, the first step is being open to realizing that you are creating these causes in your life. If you continue to think you're a victim, you'll never be open to that. You'll never be able to look around yourself and go, okay, I accept that I created this situation. So what has happened is we've got a marvelous thing called a mirror. Now we have the physical mirror that we can look in and see what is going on. But we also have the mirror of our life around us. And the mirror looks like what I explained earlier, what I did with my father. The mirror looks like when I see this challenge over here, it means that it's not that person trying to do something to me. It's not somebody who's just stolen my car, being mean to me, picking me out, victimizing me, hurting me, doing what they shouldn't be doing, and goodness knows the police should take more stand about it and get these people and put them away. What it means is, where am I stealing from myself? Where in my own mind, in my own life, am I stealing the vitality and the freedom from my life? Where am I causing myself to become restricted, limited, and bound by something? Because when your car disappears, what happens? You don't have the freedom to go out anymore like you did. You don't have the power to move, to get from one place to another easily. So that's what you can do. You can use these experiences outside of you to reflect what's going on inside. And when we start doing that, then we can change something. Then we can look inside and go, oh, so I've been holding back on my freedom. I've been afraid to step forward and risk anything. I've been afraid to go forward and go, I'm here. I am right here, right now. I stand in my freedom, and I am excited about it, and I love life. Have you ever done that? In that part or something else? What about the idea of being in a relationship? He talks also about the idea that others can see what we're doing. Well, if we're in a relationship and we're afraid to let go of control, what do you think happens to that relationship? What do you think happens to it? I bet you a lot of you have experienced what happens. The relationship kind of goes other places and doesn't stay together. That's because we have to take responsibility in any relationship we're in and realize that the other person isn't out there to hurt us in our lives. And sometimes the person that we're with is, in fact, always, the person we're with is exactly who we need to be with. Exactly. Whether you like it or not, they're exactly the person you need to be with because they're showing you about you. So if you have somebody in your life you don't like, and guess what? There's probably parts of your own self you don't like and you're afraid to look at. Now, we can even take this a step further. What about the war that just came up? Is it Syria that it's in now? I get confused. There's so many different places. But anyway, whatever's going on in the Middle East, we see a war in the Middle East. How do we react to that? Do we want to change it? Do we want to stop it? Should we take a stand and go, oh, we should send troops, or no, we shouldn't send troops, or all of this stuff? Well, we certainly can take a stand. There's nothing wrong with that. But you might want to look inside and say, well, where is a war going on in me? Where am I fighting myself? Where am I having a sense of tug and pull? Where am I believing one thing, one instance, and believing something else in another instance? And so I've got this thing going on, and I can't quite decide. A good example is how many people here would like to be a millionaire? Nobody? I wouldn't mind being a millionaire. How many people think they deserve to be a millionaire? You know, and to the point where they're willing to do exactly what it takes to be that. A lot of times we do that. We think we deserve it on one hand, and then on the other hand, we aren't so sure, because we don't want to take the responsibility of what it might mean to have to do what it would take to do it. I came up against that one time, quite some time ago, and I had to really work with that. And it was in relationship to the idea of Jesus, and that Jesus represents this magnificent love of God. If you look at the Bible, it's the God in the first part of the Bible is a very dominating father-type man in a sense that tells us right and wrong and all these different things. And then when Jesus comes along on the second part of the Bible, God changes to this very loving, accepting, open beingness that is personal for each one of us. And I often thought when I was younger, I'd like to be like Jesus. I'd like to be able to have that absolute unconditional love that Jesus seemed to express for everybody. Absolutely, and I wanted it so bad. And there was a little part of me that said, but he got crucified. But he got crucified for it. And I found myself pulling back. So that's where you can have those two conflicting things. And so I was at war with myself. I wanted to be loving on one hand, absolutely unconditional, but I was afraid on the other hand. So I was sending out two messages. I was sending out two causes that hit. And you know what happens when you got two conflicting causes that hit? A lot of times nothing. You end up staying right where you're at. Nothing really takes place, or it starts to take place very, very slowly, because you have to slowly start changing the one attitude you don't like into another attitude that you do like. So you know, religious science is very, very simple religion. We don't ask you to believe a lot of things. We have some principles, but we don't even ask you to really, really say that you have to believe in every one of them right off the bat. We say grow into it, learn about it, see if it doesn't make sense to you. If it doesn't, that's fine. Religious science doesn't make demands, isn't going to say that if you don't believe a certain way, then you're excommunicated. We don't do any of that. We have a very simple message. There's a source of good. God is a source of good in the universe. And it's available for each one of us to use, but only according to our belief. Only according to our belief. So what are you believing? What are you personally believing? Not just overall, but in every little area of your life. Where can you change something today? Where can you look at a cause or a challenge in your life that you don't like and sit down, and it's going to take some work. It isn't going to be an instantaneous thing. You might have to sit down and think about it a little bit. But where can you change something? Where can you change that attitude, that belief that maybe you had that you don't want anymore? For a long time, when we were a little bit younger, it was like I would do the accounting my way, and that was the way it had to be. And then, no, Mike had to do it his way, and that was the way it had to be. And finally, one day, I sat down and go, there's got to be a better way than this. It doesn't have to be my way or your way. Let's see if we can't do something together, make something different. And you know, it took me like 3 months to decide we could sit down and actually do something together. I mean, but But it takes time to get out of the habit, to look at the habits of what we're thinking and go, is there a different way of doing this than I've always done it? Is there a different way of doing this? And you've probably all heard about the woman who really, she went over to her daughter's house and went for a wonderful dinner that her daughter was going to make. And she watched her daughter make this roast. And the daughter took the roast and she cut the roast in half and she put it into 2 pans and then she put it in the oven to cook. And the mother is going, why did you cut the roast in half to cook? And the daughter goes, well, that's the way you always did it. And she goes, well, that's because my oven was too small for a bigger pan. We end up just like that. We end up doing the same thing. We end up following the same habits of our parents. We end up following the same habits we fell into as very young children. And we forget that maybe we need to take them out and look at them in a new way, especially if we aren't getting the results that we want back, especially if we aren't getting those events and those good things back that we desire. We might just have to change the cause. And it might take us a little while to think about what that might be. Now, the good news is there's a whole bunch of wonderful people here who will help you. They're called practitioners. And the ministers here are always willing to listen and give you a little help. And another place that you might look if you aren't quite sure what's going on, because sometimes we can have habits of speech, sometimes we can have habits of action that we aren't even aware of going on. Sometimes it's really good to have your partner help you. I had a situation where I kept falling into that poor me attitude. Have any of you been there? That poor me, oh, I'm so achy and I don't feel good and I just don't have the energy to get this done. And oh, I was so good at whining, so good at it. And I read a book and it was called Soliciting Prophecy. Some of you might be familiar with that, where it talks about how people gain energy from other people, and one of the ways is by the poor me attitude or by dominating or questioning. There were several of them. And anyway, I was into this poor me, and I go to my daughter and I go, I really want help. When I get into this situation, I want to know when I'm doing this because sometimes it's really unconscious. And so I asked my youngest daughter to help, and one day I was really into that poor me bit, and she walks up and she says, oh, poor me, I think I'll walk off and be aloof now. Guess what happened? Kind of snapped me out of it. Because she showed me what I was doing. She caught me at the moment I was doing it so I could see what was happening. And then, of course, my husband has the good one. He'll see me starting to get into that, and he goes, oh, do you want some Velcro? So you can get with a partner and have them help you with something that you want to change. And talk to them about what would be a light way to do it, what would be a way that you wouldn't automatically bristle up and go, they're doing it to me again. So really, the challenge is for each and every one of us is to look at our lives, see what's going on in our lives, see what we want to change, see why we want to change it, and then think about how we want to change it. Because just wanting to change it doesn't do anything until you know how you want to change it to something else, to something positive. So make that a rule rather than something that you just blindly go along with in your life. So if you'll please join me, we'll do a treatment for this to know that that happens. So, there is life in the universe, and this life is rotating, it's vibrating, it's circling, It's vibrant and alive, and it is flowing through every atom of the universe. Life doesn't quit at the end of the day, but continues to flow in and through things. And I know this life is flowing in and through me right this very moment, and in and through each person in this room and beyond this room to the universe, because life cannot be stopped. Neither can the wisdom that goes along with it, or the power, or the peace, or the joy. And so I know this very moment that change is absolutely possible. I recognize now that I am the cause of everything in my life. And I choose to take that responsibility and quit running from it. I choose to take and see that I am the cause and allow myself to then change it. Use it as a learning platform instead of feeling like it's criticism. I allow myself to explore and to experiment in my life and to see how I can change things so that I start receiving back that which I desire, the love, the joy, the communication, the companionship. I no longer need to be a victim, because in truth, I never was. I no longer need the past to tell me I was wrong, because it doesn't exist anymore. I no longer need to worry about the future, because now, this present moment is the power, is my power to change, my power to be, my power to move forward in life the way I want to. So I set my goal out there as to what I want, whether it's relationships, whether it's spirituality, whether it's financial, whether it's just plain goodness and peace and joy. I put my goal there, and then I look around me to see what is going on and allow my life to reflect back to me. I play and I explore and I experiment in changing those things and see what happens. For I know there is a balance in the universe, and that balance is always working for me, not against me. And with such gratitude for this idea, for the knowledge that Spirit never leaves me in the pits, never leaves me in fear or doubt, but is always right there as my companion to lift me up, to move me in a new direction, to give me new ideas, to inspire me. I am grateful. I am grateful, and I open my heart for that inspiration to take place. And as I release this treatment, I release it with that knowing, with that joy, with that enthusiasm. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.